This classic whistle-stop presentation is brought to you by Out West. Love the West? So do we. Click the icon or go to scvoutwest.com.
Our next stop is the Locomotive Works that turned out many of the engines that are in our American history books. The Rogers Locomotive Works near the Great Falls of Paterson, New Jersey. Dominated by the Great Falls of the Passaic River with its 77-foot high, 280-foot wide cascading waterfall, is the dramatic tableau of the Great Falls Society for the Establishment of Useful Manufacturers Historic District. Concentrated on a 119-acre tract just 3 blocks from downtown Paterson, the recently designated National Historic Landmark houses a tightly knit complex of architecturally impressive structures connected by an intricate network of water raceways. Each of the 60 buildings has played a monumental role in shaping industrial America. More than 200 years ago, on July 10, 1778, Alexander Hamilton visited the Great Falls with George Washington and envisioned harnessing the falls to build America's first industrial city. In 1791, Hamilton helped organize the Society for Establishment of Useful Manufacturers. The Society then hired Pierre Elephant and Peter Colt to build a water power raceway system to provide abundant and inexpensive energy to new industrial mills. The resulting industrial complex attracted many creative people to Paterson who developed textiles machinery, steam locomotives, flax, jute, the Holland submarine, Wright aircraft engines, silk, apparel, and many more products. As a result, Paterson is called the cradle of American industry. The motor that powered the Spirit of St. Louis on Lindbergh's epic flight across the Atlantic Ocean was a Paterson product. Samuel Colt, a Pattersonian, invented the revolver that conquered the West. The Colt gun mill still stands at the foot of Van Houten Street. John P. Holland, a school teacher, perfected the world's finest practical submarine. Holland tested his submarine in the Passaic River in 1878. Recovered from the river near the Spruce Street Bridge 50 years later, the submarine is presently on exhibit in the Paterson Museum. The whistle-stop crew stopped off at 2 Market Street, where we went into the Thomas Rogers building, which is the home of the Great Falls Development Corporation. And there we met Grace M. George, our tour director, who gave us a brief history of the Rogers Locomotive Works.
That waterfall, which is the reason for Paterson's existence, is a magnificent natural wonder too. The average flow of water here is 1 billion gallons every 24 hours. It's a lot of water. And we're very proud of it. And very happy that Alexander Hamilton had the foresight to dream of a city in this area. One of the first industries here was the locomotive industry. But Thomas Rogers had come to this city in 1832 as a carpenter. In 1835, he was asked to assemble an imported British locomotive, which he did. But he felt he could make a better locomotive, made a pattern of every piece, and proceeded to do what he said, make a better one. He did improve on the British designs, because American terrain is not British terrain. And his locomotive shop grew from just a building or two on the corner of Market and Spruce Street here in 1836 to this whole establishment in 1876. The building we are in is this 1876 erecting shop. This erecting shop has been restored. It is now an office building with Paterson's Museum on the first floor. But the locomotives, as you see here, were built on an assembly line using a vertical and horizontal assembly line system. The smallest parts were made on the 4th floor here, the attic, literally, and lowered through trapdoors to the other floors. On the 1st floor, there were 12 bays. These tracks, by the way, are still beneath the pavement outside. Public Service Electric and Gas cusses them out every time they have to dig. The walls in this building are 18 and 26 inches thick, solid brick. All the major parts for the locomotives were made in other buildings and brought here. And the locomotives proceeded on track over pits in the main hall of the building so that men could work on the underparts while others worked on the upper parts simultaneously. Each completed locomotive was pulled out the doors, put on the tracks, originally fired up, and it chugged around Market Street and up to the railroad in the heart of downtown Patterson. They turned out one complete locomotive every other day. Here we have the upper and middle raceways, which brought power from the river to all these mills. Casey Jones's engine was a Rogers. The engine that was used in the TV program Petticoat Junction was a Rogers. The one at Promontory Point in Utah, Golden Spikes, the 119, I think it was a Rogers, and so on. I'd love to see the General, the most famous of the Rogers locomotives, back here in Patterson, but there's no chance that we'll get that back from Atlanta because it's stored down there in beautiful working order, I'm told. But it would be wonderful to have that one back. So the Rogers plant, like many other Patterson manufacturers and plants and groups, has played an important part in the development of the United States, industriously and historically too.
Many Patterson steam locomotives were shipped around the world. 144, or 59% of the 246 American locomotives used to build the Panama Canal were built in Patterson. Old 299 is one of those locomotives that helped build the Panama Canal. It is a 5-foot gauge engine, which is wider than the U.S. standard gauge, 4 feet 8 1/2 inches. The 5-foot gauge was selected because it was the size of early American southern railroads. However, because the Panama Canal was isolated from other countries, it didn't convert to the U.S. standard gauge in the late 19th century when American railroads standardized the track gauge. This engine was built around 1908. In 1914, after the canal was completed, many engines were sold or scrapped, except for old 299. Today, engine 299 has become the major exhibit in the expanding Patterson Museum. Next to old 299 is a 1910 Alco Cook 040. It is the oldest existing saddle tank type locomotive built in Patterson. The 4-wheel traction drive saddle tank locomotive is the most basic steam locomotive ever built. This small, simple, unpretentious, unbeautiful but necessary locomotive derives its name from the large inverted U-shaped water tank which straddles the locomotive boiler. This design eliminates the need for a large water tender, and by concentrating the weight over the 4 traction drive wheels, made it possible to build a small, extremely efficient and maneuverable locomotive. For nearly 50 years, the locomotive industry prospered in Patterson, employing thousands of workers. During the years the industry ran supreme, over 6,000 locomotives were made in Patterson. The Patterson Museum is a fine tribute to the men and women who helped build industry in America. For more information on the Patterson Museum, please write to the Great Falls Development Corporation, the Thomas Rogers Building, 2 Market Street, Patterson, New Jersey, 07501.
Shop, look, and listen right here at WhistleStopUSATV.com.